break it down for you. Commitment is a tier 2 kill steal within Zane's purple tree, granting 20% gun damage and cooldown rate up to 2 stacks for a total of 40%. But with the Seeing Red and Death Follows Close stills from his blue tree, that can go up to 28%, increased to 30% if using the Spy or the Seeing Dead class mods. Commitment nowadays is still a very good still and taken on most builds as a way to get down in the tree deeper, but as a good source of cooldown rate as well. Since the gun damage only maxing out at around 56 to 60% for most builds isn't really that much compared to the 400 to 1000% that you can get from Violent Momentum. But this is only what Commitment does and has done since April 1st, 2021, because prior to that patch, Commitment mistakenly didn't have a cap, which allowed you to stack 20% gun damage and cooldown rate, or again 28% with Seeing Red and Death Follows Close, infinitely. And boy did people ever. I mean, this was huge. It was an incredible addition in Zane's purple tree and was effectively the first raw gun damage still outside of Violent Momentum to actually see widespread use for the gun damage that it provided. YouTube videos were popping up everywhere showcasing builds with this, showing how to abuse it the hardest, get as many stacks as possible, and telling everyone how completely broken this new still was and how insane it is that we have infinitely stacking damage in this video game. But was it actually that broken? If you've read the title, you already know that, yeah, no, I'm here to actually defend infinitely stacking gun damage on Zane. Zane gets a lot of gun damage from Violent Momentum. At 5 out of 5, this is usually around 200 to 400% gun damage during general gameplay. For Commitment to match this value, you need 7 to 14 stacks, assuming you have Seeing Red and Death Follows Close, and 10 to 20 without. This isn't that many and was totally achievable for most gameplay scenarios, but this really isn't that massive of a damage buff for Zane. You are doubling his gun damage, but you know what else doubles his gun damage? An Infiltrator or Antifreeze with 5 points into Violent Momentum. You know what outdamages both of those? 28% cryo damage and 105% crit damage from the Executor. And yes, if we're saying that this is an equivalent damage boost to like the Infiltrator or Antifreeze, that is still big to be able to have pretty much that amount of gun damage for free without taking up your class mod slot, because then you get to double your gun damage and still use an Executor. And while yes, that is going to give you a pretty big damage boost, Zane has enough gun damage as is, and he just kind of wants more multipliers. Because gun damage from both Violent Momentum and Commitment are additive together, it's not that big of a buff on your overall damage output as you might intuitively think. And this is where the idea of diminishing returns comes in, where you would assume that doubling your gun damage might result in 2 times your damage output. That's not the case. We'll use a quick example here using 100 as our base damage. We'll start with 400% gun damage total, 28% cryo damage from the presumed Executor we have equipped, and 105% crit damage. This gives us a total of 1,312 on our damage output. Doing the same thing except adding another 400% gun damage, that brings us to 2,361.6. Instead of being a 100% damage increase, this is an 80% damage increase. And the effective damage increase you get from your gun damage only gets lower and lower the more and bigger multiplicative damage bonuses that you have. And again, this example is only using the stats provided by the Executor. This isn't accounting for Icebreaker Victory Rush, Our Man Flint, Terror damage, literally anything else that gives it any damage outside of gun damage that's often used in Zane builds. So most of the time for most Zane builds, this wouldn't even be an 80% damage increase. It would probably be closer to 50 or 60. But okay, you got me. You can get much higher stacks than 20 with Commitment. Except it wasn't actually that easy to do. Because Commitment stacked infinitely, it would never refresh the stack duration like Zane's capped kill stills do. You had 15 seconds of free stacking before your stack gain had to outpace your stack loss. This ended up with most general builds actually hovering around that 20 stack mark, though able to get into the 30s depending on how dense the mobbing was, how effective your build was, and how much you could effectively snowball those stacks. Which, by the way, was just a really fun way to play Zane and a really good measure of how good you were playing and how good your build was. But there was two exceptions here. The first was the Seeing Dead class mod, allowing Zane to stack his killstills just by hitting an enemy, and at the time giving 25% killstill effectiveness buff compared to today's 10%. This would boost the commitment bonus up to 33% with Seeing Dead, Seeing Red, and Death Follows Close, while also allowing you to hit insanely high stat counts with high fire rate weapons, especially during bossing. The Seeing Dead could get you hitting well over 100 stacks for like a 3,300% gun damage boost. And that's a little bit crazy. Now, I haven't mentioned the CDR of commitment quite yet. I've mostly been talking about the gun damage, and it's because it was genuinely quite broken to stack that much cooldown on Zane, especially since with Seeing Red and Mantis, it did kind of let you snowball into those higher stat counts the longer mobbing went on. The absolute peak of this would be the Spy, our second exception, letting the last charge of Mantis activate killstills again, as well as increasing their effectiveness by another 10% and giving another 8-second duration. 23-second duration and 30% total gun damage and CDR per stack, as well as Mantis being even more effective for stacking it. This meant that even if you only somehow stayed at the lower end of your stacks at that original 20 figure we were playing with, you were hitting 600% gun damage already. But more often than not, the Spy was letting you hit much crazier numbers. The Spy could also roll points into commitment, bringing it up to 40% base per stack, 56% with Seeing Red and Death Follows Close, and 60% with the killstill bonus from Spy. 1,200% gun damage at just 20 stacks, but you could very easily hit well over 50, which even just at 50, that's already 3,000% gun damage. I get it, this sounds fucking crazy, but I promise you when I say this was overall good for Zane. Commitment was a little bit overtuned, but it was not because it stacked infinitely. It was because it simply wasn't balanced around stacking infinitely. Commitment, if balanced around still being able to stack forever, would have opened Zane's build diversity and potential playstyles up greatly. It could have worked as an alternative playstyle to Violent Momentum, where Violent Momentum has the Infiltrator and Antifreeze for insanely high gun damage. Commitment would have had the Seeing Dead and Spy. But unfortunately, OMG infinitely stacking gun damage crazy OP secret Korean Zane build 90,000 LP makes a way better title than, hey, commitment is maybe a little bit strong, but actually if Gearbox just nerfed it down to like 10 to 15% gun damage and 5% CDR, it would probably be pretty reasonable and actually super cool. All anyone ever talked about was how insane it was that commitment stacked infinitely, and never the fact that there was serious potential for an alternative Zane playstyle that didn't require moving fast and or eating ass. But unfortunately, the hype around commitment outpaced the reality of commitment. And again, on that dreadful April 1st patch, Gearbox took action and hard capped it at 2 stacks, leaving it as a pretty mid and extremely forgettable still. Just imagine a world, the build diversity of a world where commitment was balanced to infinitely stack, and Green Tree was actually ever worth investing in. Unfortunately, we aren't in that world, and I think I just gave myself depression. But hey, what do you think about commitment? Do you also think it was nerfed unjustly, or do you just think that I'm a Zane supremacist that just wants my character to be super cool and broken and OP? I would love for you to let me know down in the comments. But that's gonna about do it for this one. I hope you guys enjoyed. If you did, definitely consider leaving a like, comment, subscribe, all that. I'll be live right after this video goes up, right here on YouTube and also from my Twitch channel, where there'll be a link to down in the description below, and just under that is a link to my Discord server where you can come and join and hang out. But with that all being said, I hope to see you guys in the next one.